Welcome and thanks for joining us today. Really excited to have you. I'm going to give you kind of a general overview of really hopefully the goal is to arm you with, if you don't already know, really how to communicate this industry to legislators, your community, law enforcement, really just how to engage in a conversation to show that this is a truly unique opportunity for every community, not just rural, not just urban, but really for Indiana, if we fully embrace this industry and start attracting or continue to attract real investment into the space. 2019 has been absolutely crazy for Indiana. We've seen our infrastructure slowly being incubated. On the processing side, farmers are getting the knowledge they need. They're learning how to identify red flags, learning how to protect themselves through contracts, which we'll get through later in the day. So again, really excited to have you here. Here's our agenda, cannabinoid what? We're going to talk about that. We're going to unwrap the 14 Farm Bill, Indiana's response to that, which was Senate Rule Act 357 back in 2014, our first CBD law, our second CBD law, which is going to be a good primer on how policy is made, and sometimes it's actually almost all the time it's never perfect. That's why we as an industry cannot get frustrated and give up. You got to keep falling forward. And then I'll unwrap the 18 Farm Bill briefly, and then Indiana's response to that in Senate Rule Act 516 from this past legislative session. I'll give a brief overview of the hemp flower litigation, and then talk a little bit about FDA and CBD and food. Again, more questions and answers at this point. So what is exactly CBD? What is THC? What is a cannabinoid? These are questions. You got to have your 30-second elevator pitch up, even if you're talking to your neighbor, your grandma, whoever. If they're unfamiliar with this, you guys are basically the voice of the industry, and you need to be prepared to educate anyone who's at least curious about the industry. So CBD and THC are both cannabinoids. There's upwards of over 100 and I don't know, maybe 18 cannabinoids in the plant, many that we don't even know about in their true value. And both are chemically similar to our own endocannabinoid system. If you don't know what the endocannabinoid system is, this is key to explaining why so many people feel benefit from using these products. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But really, hemp, I think hopefully everyone in this room knows, is mainly grown for CBD, fiber, and grain right now. There's much more applications than these three aspects, but these are really the main industries that are attracting investments into it. And as everyone knows, CBD is kind of the rock star of the industry, and it's what's really, I think, generating a lot of the interest in general for the industry. So we're excited for that, and then also excited to have you guys explore where the rest of the value of this plant comes from. So we're using the entire plant throughout the process. And again, this marijuana is really grown for the THC content. So I like to use the example of a German Shepherd and a poodle. Right? Hemp and marijuana are both part of the cannabis family. A German Shepherd and a poodle are both, part of the dog family. I don't know the scientific term for that, so forgive me. But you buy them for different reasons, and they have different traits, but they're both dogs, right? German Shepherd's more protective, an active dog, and a poodle's kind of more of a lap comfort dog. So I just want to make sure everyone's prepared to have these conversations with your community, your family members, and friends, because the more I think people get educated in this, the light bulb goes on, and it's like, why, that seems pretty common sense. Why aren't we doing more to attract more investments in the state here and also in the Midwest? So this is, I always enjoy giving this slide as well. This is some really good data from BDS Analytics. This is from a couple months ago. We have 15% of adults 21 and over in the U.S. have consumed hemp-derived products within the past 6 months. That's awesome. But look at the rest of the slide. It becomes very, very scary. No one has any idea what they're taking. No one knows what's in it. They don't know that that CBD and THC, there's a difference between those two. They don't know that CBD is non-psychoactive. So again, this is why education continues to be absolutely key, not only for the farmers, but for the industry as well and the consumers. So that way they can begin discriminating against good products versus bad products. And they can look for red flags. They can ask questions on on the brick and mortar store, where are you getting your CBD from? Where's the hemp biomass coming from? Can I see your COA? Can I look at it and really understand? And again, become the consumers. The more picky they are, I think that's better for the entire industry to mature. So yeah, only 22% of U.S. Adults 21 and over know cannabinoids are and can articulate the definition. So endocannabinoid system, this was actually first found in 1988 and again expanded in 1992 through a federal funded study. And we actually found out that the human body has an entire system built around releasing and producing naturally compounds that are very similar, actually very chemically similar to cannabinoids found in the cannabis plant, hemp and marijuana. So you have CB1 receptor and CB2 receptors. And really the endocannabinoid system is how your body maintains homeostasis and maintains your general health. So when you're hot, and when it's hot outside and you start sweating, that's your body producing a cannabinoid that tells your body to produce the sweat. When you're cooled off, it produces an enzyme that then breaks down that cannabinoid and you stop sweating. So this is why, you hear, I've personally heard it as well. I've seen it with my own family members and friends. This impacts everyone differently in a very, very positive way because it's giving the body basically the ammo it needs, and then your body directs it where it needs to go. So the 2014 bill was really how we what kind of got this whole thing started again and slowly decoupled hemp and marijuana from the federal level, which we heard from yesterday on how that happened. So it said, notwithstanding the Controlled Substances Act, any other federal law an institution of higher education or a state department of agriculture may grow or cultivate industrial hemp, provided it is done for purposes of research conducted under an agricultural pilot program. And I highlighted this word because this is, if you look around the country, even operating under the 14 Farm Bill, every state interpreted this law differently, right? I'm of the belief that Congress intended to unleash the states and figure out, live up to the name and have these be, experiments state by state and see what works best and give them flexibility. If you look at Kentucky, they took this very broadly. They allowed their farmers to enter into basically a mass memorandum of understanding with the University of Kentucky and kind of unleash them. So if you're scoring based on number of acres licensed, they are, in the Midwest, they're in the top. However, I think we're slowly finding out, and farmers are finding out as well, the number of acres doesn't mean success and doesn't equate to success, right? And one of the benefits of being, nationally known as a kind of a slower state to adapt to things, you can cherry pick from other states what they did wrong, what they did right, and really try to implement them here in Indiana to make sure we're putting our farmers in a position to be successful, but also maintaining the integrity of the hemp market as well. And I also highlighted that as well because the agricultural pilot program is actually a term of art, right? So when you're reading a statute or reading a bill, just because you think you know what it means doesn't mean that's what it means in the bill. So they actually define agricultural pilot program really to study the growth, cultivation, or marketing of industrial hemp, and kind of the canons of statutory interpretation. The first thing you do is apply the plain meaning to a word. That way you can best capture the congressional intent. If you look up the plain meaning in the dictionary, marketing means the action or business of promoting and selling products or services, including market research and advertising. So I just highlight this as well as, again, to highlight the fact that every state interpreted this differently, for good or for worse. So in response to the 2014 Farm Bill, the General Assembly passed Senate Rule Act 357 in 2014. This authorized the production of, possession of, and scientific study of, and commerce in industrial hemp in Indiana. It also required our seed commissioner to adopt rules to regulate the production as well as come up with a licensing process as well. And this is a really, this point doesn't get highlighted much. In this bill, it actually permanently removed industrial hemp from our state's definition of marijuana. So this was really a clear sign. Again, we understood what the federal government was doing, and we actually permanently decoupled hemp and marijuana in our statute here, which is a great, it's really how we got to where we are today as well. So from 2014, 15, 16, we're pretty quiet as a state on the hemp front. But then this is, I think it's pretty true for anyone. Really, you either get involved in politics because maybe your family has a history of it, or you've been impacted personally by something that makes you get engaged and fires you up. And this is exactly what happened with our 2017, the CBD bill, House and Rule Act 1148. We had parents showing up to the State House, working with their legislators, absolutely in a state of paralysis because their children are suffering from certain medical conditions that the traditional pharmaceutical route and doctor route was not helping them. Somehow they got exposed to the option of a CBD supplement, and overnight they saw huge improvements in their child's health. So legislators listened, and they came up with a very, very narrow CBD law that you could only use or possess CBD under very limited medical circumstances. However, the market had a very, very different interpretation of the statute. We had CBD starting to show up in grocery stores, vape shops, as well as dedicated stores as well. So it was a interesting dynamic between state law but also the market as well and consumer demand, because the consumer demand was obviously there. So this led to state excise police essentially raiding an upscale grocery store south of Indianapolis. And they did this to a couple stores around the state, cited them for selling marijuana. And so it was actually, this is almost the best thing that happened to the industry here in Indiana, because it really brought the attention almost to a national level, as well as engaged people and activated people who are benefiting from the product and easy access to it as well. And then in November of 2017, the Attorney General released an opinion that CBD is still a Schedule I controlled substance because marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance. So while I think the Attorney General interpreted the state law correctly, I think they're a little off in the federal law. And as a result of all this confusion, Governor Holcomb actually stepped in and kind of told both sides to go back to the corners. We're going to have an educational period. And what this did was actually allowed, it basically extended the window to up until the next session and allowed the General Assembly to clarify their intent and clarify the law on CBD. So this was, again, it was pretty much chaos, but it was bad. There's opportunity in chaos, and this is what kind of activated, I think, it's again how we got to where we are, why we're all here this weekend. So we're thankful for it. So the following session in 2018, Governor Holcomb continued to extend this educational window because the General Assembly demonstrated a strong appetite to clarify the law and allow CBD products to be sold and possessed with a few requirements. So the first thing they did was they repealed what they did in 2017. So this is what I mentioned earlier about the legislative process. It's never perfect, but keep in mind, here in Indiana, we're a part-time civil legislature. It's not their full-time job. That's why when you're interacting with legislators, don't assume they're up to speed on something. There's thousands of bills filed every year, but just know if you approach them and show a genuine interest in educating them and bringing them up to speed, I think that's probably the best way to approach them. And they do need to hear from you. The industry cannot be silent and sit back and wait for things to happen to us. We need to be proactive, talk about the economic development we're having in our communities, the number of people we're hiring, the investments, in particular in the urban and the rural areas that haven't maybe not have seen them for a few decades. So General Assembly defined what we referred to as low THC hemp extract, and this is basically anything that's made from the hemp plant as long as it's below 0.3% total THC. This is key because I know there's a number of farmers here really around the country selling smokable flower, craft hemp flower, which is the term I prefer. I hate the term smokable hemp. But this is key because, again, we need to make sure we're putting compliant products on the market and also not jeopardizing our consumers by consuming a product that may or may not be compliant. This is, again, kind of a little known fact. Indiana was the first state to enact and require a labeling requirement for distribution and sale of CBD products in Indiana. We also took into account law enforcement concerns. During session, there was a narrative, well, how are we going to know what retailers are actually putting in that bottle or putting in that bag? How do we know it's going to be what they say it is, essentially? How do we know they're not selling marijuana? So there is language in here. It is a level 5 felony for a retailer to knowingly sell marijuana packaged as low THC hemp. I think everyone, again, needs to understand what laws are on the books, so that way we're acting like a true industry that wants to do right and stay compliant. So I always like to remind people this as well. And I also like another narrative was, well, how do we know if I pull someone over in a car and they have CBD oil or hemp flower on them? How do I know it's not marijuana? Well, actually in our law, you're better off just possessing the marijuana because it's actually a lower offense because it's a class, I'm sorry. Sorry, yeah, okay, so this is about the packaging. I apologize, I'm a little tired. I do have a 1-month-old, so it's been a little rough for me. You actually have a disincentive to hide marijuana packaged as low hemp THC. You're better off just possessing it on yourself because it's actually a higher offense to try to hide it from law enforcement. So I like to remind consumers that as well. Okay, so 2018, that gets up to the 2018 Farm Bill in December. This permanently removed hemp from the Controlled Substances Act and actually expanded the definition of hemp. If you guys will recall, there's been a lot of frustrations by some federal agencies on picking apart, well, maybe Congress didn't intend for this to be a product. So Congress responded and said, we're actually going to expand this definition and include all derivatives and extracts of the hemp plant. So again, anything you can create out of that hemp plant, as long as it's below 0.3% THC, total THC, you're going to be fine, and hopefully you're going to have a market for it as well. And then really important, this is, I think, a very subtle thing that's very important for here in Indiana and other states who are operating under 14 Farm Bill. The 18 Farm Bill actually allowed states to continue to operate under their 14 Farm Bill authorization until USDA gets their programs up and running. So USDA, our 14 Farm Bill is going to expire next, I believe, October or November of some time. So we do have some leeway and flexibility going into next year. And I know the state, Indiana state chemist is here, along with the seed commissioner, are going to give you guys an update on kind of what to expect. Another really key part about this is 18 Farm Bill totally removed DEA from the picture on regulating hemp. This is huge because this is one of the federal agencies I was referring to earlier that continue to frustrate states who had legitimate and compliant 14 hemp programs. It made it clear that USDA is to treat this like any other regulated agricultural product. FDA does maintain jurisdiction over CBD products. Rules are expected soon. That's the federal government's timeline, so it could be a couple years. I have no idea. Their outward-facing stance, their public stance is it's illegal to introduce CBD into food products and other drink products and transport them across state lines. So their public stance and their enforcement actions don't really match up. The only enforcement we've seen from FDA is sending warning letters to companies who are making absolutely absurd medical claims on the products. I hope no one in this room is doing that, because that is the first and what's proven to be the only way to get FDA's attention. And it's also, it's not, I don't think it's good for the industry as well to oversell the product, and it's not legal. Also in there, it made it clear that states and Indian tribes are prohibited from interfering with the interstate transportation of hemp and hemp products. This is huge as well because it's making sure that organizations like us, farmers from different states, can cross lines freely and really start interacting in the stream of commerce together. So what was Indiana's response to it? We passed, General Assembly passed Senate Rule Act 516 this past session. This is really a banner year for Indiana because of this bill, and also because of the support we're getting from our policymakers and our regulators as well to make this happen. It also established a newly formed, it's called the Indiana Hemp Advisory Committee, and the whole goal of this committee, it's made up of certain stakeholders to provide guidance and advice to the seed commissioner in the development of our state plan. If I didn't mention it before, the 18 Farm Bill basically gives states two choices. One, you can do nothing and we'll set up a program for you. Or two, you can get all of your stakeholders in a room together and develop a tailor-made regulatory plan that our farmers can operate under. We are a strong advocate in saying we want to make sure our farmers are working with a state regulatory body as opposed to the federal government, just because we believe that obviously the closer you can get to the people, the more responsive and the more creative you can get for the industry. And it does require our state plan to be submitted to USDA before December 31st of 2019. So we are, I know our regulators have been working very hard, communicating with stakeholders in the development of this plan, and we're very excited to have it get released, because that's kind of the next step of continuing to move forward in the industry. I think it's been mentioned before, in 2019, we licensed just over 5,300 acres. CBD, fiber, and grain. In fact, I think almost about half of that was for fiber, which we're really excited about. If you guys attended yesterday, I think a lot of our experienced growers were, one of the questions was, what's next? What's next for the industry? Where should I be looking? I think it was a resounding, you need to be looking at grain and the fiber side for the long-term game. It's just going to take a little longer for that infrastructure to get developed, but we do need pioneers to help develop that along the way. And again, as I mentioned, from 2014 to 2018, the entire state grew 24 acres during this period. So we've had a huge increase in interest from our farmers, and that's key because, again, if farmers aren't successful in this industry, there is no industry. So we need to make sure we're putting our farmers in a position to be successful. So I'm going to give a brief update on the craft hemp flower litigation. I do want to give a shout out to the plaintiffs involved in this because without them, that wouldn't be possible. And I will tell you, this is not a very politically popular thing to do. Challenge the state, especially when you want to be a partner and come to the table. But these guys were personally impacted by their business, and it was a little frustrating because here in the state we've been told we need more guidance from the federal government after that 14 Farm Bill passed. Because as I mentioned, you can interpret that just about any way. Well, 18 Farm Bill came, and we saw the industry get taken a few steps back. So I'm going to kind of walk through what is this smokable hemp. It's obviously it's the flower, the top cola is the flower of the hemp plant. This is no different than CBD oil. It's just another delivery method of CBD to the body. We do have cannabinoid receptors in our lungs, especially with some of the vaping news out there. It might be a much safer alternative because you know exactly what you're getting. Sometimes you don't know, especially with some of the corners that are being cut in the vaping industry, you don't always know what's in that bottle, and we've seen people getting sick from some of the carrier oils they're using in those products. And also, instead of going through your liver and processing that way, again, it goes to your lungs and directly into your bloodstream. So I've had consumers say it's helping me quit smoking. Just like CBD oil, it's helping me get off opioids, and also it's just sometimes more of an enjoyable experience. So the plaintiff's main argument is that basically the 18 Farm Bill broadly defined hemp, right? We expanded the definition from the 14 Farm Bill to the 18 Farm Bill. We also made it clear that the 18 Farm Bill legalized all hemp products below 0.3% THC, and also mandated that no state or Indian tribe interfere with the interstate commerce of hemp and hemp products. And really, this whole case, I think the judge hung her hat and focused mainly on one word, and that's the production, right? So in the 18 Farm Bill, it states, states are free to not allow the production of hemp in their borders. There's nothing stopping from doing that, right? But you can't have a program and then pick and choose which products you're going to allow to be sold either in your state or across state lines. So we were arguing, the state was arguing that we're well within our rights to limit the production of this of smokable hemp or craft hemp flower. We took a different interpretation of that word and said, well, production is really about maybe requiring certified seed or having required setback requirements for certain hemp growers, limiting licenses, that kind of thing. So that's really what the case hinged on, and Judge Barker, who is 76 years old and a Reagan appointee, sided with the industry and said, yeah, it's pretty clear Congress has been trying for years to decouple hemp and marijuana and also open this market up to our farmers. So we're very excited about that. Attorney General did appeal it, so we'll be up in the 7th Circuit in the next couple months. The good news is the injunction remains in effect here in Indiana up until we get a new ruling from the 7th Circuit. I can't speculate on when that will be, but it probably won't be sometime until Q1. But the court ultimately they can release the opinion whenever they desire. And I do want to put this quote up here, more to highlight the fact that why I always harp on education and why I always harp on getting to know your community, inviting law enforcement into your facility, inviting the mayor, the council, really, again, trying to educate the public in your community on what you're doing. In Judge Barker's words, it is a change for law enforcement, right? for 80 years, it's been on the war on drugs, and this has been ingrained in a lot of people's minds. So it's going to be a tough transition, and we need to be there to help them, to educate them, and show them that you're doing it right. So what's next for hemp? We're obviously awaiting USDA's response to comments received before December 30th, 2019. If you guys see, we have these I believe are in your packet as well. We have them out on the table. If you guys don't submit comments after this weekend, I'm going to be very, very upset with you. I'll track you, each and every one of you, down. But I know there's a lot of times getting involved in the process and participating, it always seems helpless, right? Federal government's huge, she's not going to listen to me. I'm telling you, if you guys don't speak up on this stuff, it's not going to change. And USDA has the authority and the ability to change these interim rules that are very detrimental to the industry based on the feedback, but only if they feel compelled to do so. So I encourage you to write your congressman, ask them to lean on USDA for you as well, in addition to submitting the comments. We're also here in Indiana anxiously awaiting our state plans release, and we're also obviously still waiting for FDA and guidance on CBD products. I agree with our speaker yesterday. I think you're going to see 2 lanes, hopefully a pharmaceutical lane, and then I also don't like the term, but kind of a recreational lane for CBD products as well. And then we're also waiting for the 7th Circuit ruling on the craft hemp flower litigation. So here's the direct link to submit comments. Again, this is not gospel, this sheet. It's really intended to kind of jumpstart your thought process and make sure that you individualize your comments. Tell them specifically how this impacts your own farm, your own business. And it's also helpful to provide solutions as well. So we talked about the short 15-day harvest window that one doesn't really appropriately account for the delays in getting test results back. I have clients that sometimes takes 2 weeks to get their test results back. So timing's key. It also forces CBD farmers to harvest an immature plant. The requirement that laboratories be DEA certified, that's a little concerning because we're not sure how many here in Indiana are DEA certified and how long that process takes for labs to get DEA certified. And also more on a philosophical level, Congress has made it clear that DEA has no role in hemp anymore, right? This is all supposed to be USDA, so there's some concern that they're slowly finding a way to creep back into the industry and really frustrate what's been going, all the positive momentum we've had here. Also, this idea of exposing farmers to criminal sanctions for growing crop above 0.5% total THC is very scary. I think it also has a chilling effect on farmers who may be willing to jump in here, but why would I risk my farm or, for potential criminal sanctions, especially since USDA in the interim final rule chooses not to establish a federal certified seed program because the genetics are not there. Right? We have a long way to go with genetics, as you guys heard yesterday. So be very, very cautious if you're planning on growing next year, and you can. Be very, very cautious on your genetics. That's the number one way to mitigate a lot of your problems up front, is making sure you know where your genetics are coming from and that they're compliant. Also, the sampling size is an issue. Farmers sell the entire hemp plant. The USDA interim final rules calls for the top third of the plant. The highest cannabinoid concentration in the plant is the top of the plant. In fact, there can be basically a 50% difference in variance between the top versus the bottom of the plant. So we're encouraging USDA to take a sample from the top, middle, and bottom of the plant, because farmers don't just sell the top third of the plant. It also jeopardizes fiber farmers, right? That's usually a non-consumable product. So we need to make sure we give them flexibility to help develop that industry as well. And then a prohibition on remedial actions is huge as well. We need to make sure that if farmers are taking the time and the expense to grow this stuff, we give them an outlet for it. So that's, again, don't take this as gospel. It's really just meant to get your brain going and encourage you to submit the comments. I think as of last week, I think there's only about 500 comments total, so I haven't checked this week, but hopefully that's increased a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions too. I might be out of time. I don't know where. No one's in here to keep me on track, all right? Am I on time? Okay. Anyone have any questions? I know I kind of flew through that. Yes?
Why is there a harvest window in the first place?
Well, it's okay. So first, it's still a regulated. This is a regulated industry, right? Very regulated. So there is a concern that we need to make sure we are staying, allowing our farmers to grow compliant products. It's very tricky because, especially on the CBD side, it's almost a game of chicken, right? You, as a farmer, you want to get your CBD content as high as you can, but when you do that, you're also increasing your THC limits as well. So again, it's kind of a game of chicken in your risk tolerance and how long you leave that in there. Maybe Don and Baum can later give some insight on that as well. That's a good question. I guess I haven't really thought about that, but my immediate answer is because it's a regulated industry, we make sure that there's compliant products leaving the field. I will say that, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the petitions. So you keep seeing the petitions online. They're the feel-good.
They're worthless.
Petition. They're worthless, right?
Comments. Comments. You need, USDA is not going to go looking at all the petitions that was signed. They're going to be looking at the comments that are submitted on this website. That is where I think everyone needs to be spending their time on this stuff. Petitions are great, and like you said, they feel good. Maybe you can send them to your congressman, but again, that's, if they're not in their district and they don't represent them, doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Yes?
Since the USDA says using Delta 9, why are we using total?
Okay, so this is a great question. Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll probably lose some fans after this, but we need to get off of that.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes, thank you. He's asking about basically Delta 9 versus total THC, and doesn't the federal law only require Delta 9 testing for compliance purposes, correct?
Correct.
So, again, I can't stress this enough. We as an industry need to get off of that. Okay, it's days of, for right now, the days of producing a crop that's 15, 16, 17, 18% CBD, you got to redo your business model. It's not going to happen. And this is coming from the guy who stuck his neck out and challenged the smokable hemp ban. Okay? My read is, yes, the definition is correct. It only references Delta 9. But if you look at the testing methodology, how do you, what is, because again, in statutory interpretation, you have to give meaning to every single word in the statute. And I can't argue away the word decarboxylation. I know it's not a testing process. I get that. But how do you give meaning to that? And it also is a concern too, because we have seen in other states, crops that have zero non-detectable Delta 9, but they're upwards of 20% THCA, right? And that's a concern because the THCAs, when if you're using or consuming marijuana, you apply heat to it because that converts an unknown amount of THCA into THC. I'll tell you, we do address this in a different way though, with the sampling size and the sampling protocol. That's how we make sure our farmers are still in a position to be successful while also maintaining the integrity of the hemp market. Does that help?
That does.
It's a good question. Thanks for bringing it up. Is everyone mad at me for saying that now? Any other questions? Yes?
What do you know about the origins of the 0.3%? From what I've read, it was two Canadian scientists writing a paper in the 70s, and in the paper they stated that that was an arbitrary number to delineate between hemp and marijuana.
Yep, there's absolutely no doubt that it's a totally arbitrary number. And in fact, I think that was actually, sampling was actually the leaf of the plant as opposed to the floral material, right? Yes. So again, there's, let's get back to the sampling size and make sure that we're getting a true representative sample of the plant as required by federal law to make sure we're capturing what the farmer's selling and not, again, just the highest concentration of cannabinoid content in the plant. So yes, it is absolutely an arbitrary number. And in our, kind of in our one-pager here, we advocate for increasing the threshold for negligent violations to 1% total THC to give farmers a little bigger safe harbor.
At harvest time, if you have a hot crop that got destroyed, does crop insurance help at all with that under the current regime, or are you pretty much yes or no?
That is a great question. And again, there's a lot more questions and answers on that front. I think there's going to be a few states that are eligible for USDA's federal crop insurance next year, but it'll be on a limited basis. I don't know the answer to that. It'd be pretty tough to pretty tough to insure an illegal act, technically, right? That's why the safe harbor is so key, because as long as the farmer's not facing criminal sanctions, it might be insurable up to 1% total THC if they do raise that level.
There's an insurance panel later today, but that would be
Perfect.
a great question to ask.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our, thank you.